Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Let me welcome you to this CLAIRE AQuA Sessions All Questions Answered event. It is organized by the CLAIRE Special Interest Group on Ethics. Thank you to the group, to Mihai in particular, and I want to also thank VUB and Alexa for the help provided to organize today's session. I am Mörch. I'm co-director of FARI, an AI institute here in Brussels, and one of the chairs also of the Brussels office of CLAIRE. And it will be my pleasure today to moderate this session on the AI Act. So before introducing the speakers of today, I wanted to maybe give you a few words on why we organized this session. The upcoming AI Act will radically transform the way AI is governed and regulated in Europe and probably beyond. That is also called the Brussels effect. This will have a strong impact on researchers, universities, companies. So we want to invite you to embark on this session to get better acquainted with the AI Act, know what is included in it, some of its key aspects, but we also want to explore what is missing from an ethical, legal, sustainability perspective. This session really intends on showing you what the future of responsible AI data and robotics research across Europe might look like. We will also want to see what could be the points of improvement for the years ahead of us. So this time we will really focus on the AI Act, its implication. We have a wide set today of speakers. We have Giovanni Sartor, Frederic Heymans, Kevin Baum, and Alex Moltzo. To give you a few words about our speaker today, Frederic Heymans will start also today by giving a short presentation of what is included in the AI Act. So during 10 minutes, you will have also the opportunity to learn more about the different features and components of this AI Act. It will be complemented then by Giovanni Sartor to also provide some updates on the legal text. Frederic Heymans is a research and project officer at the Knowledge Center Data and Society imec-SMIT-VUB here in Brussels. Within this Knowledge Center, Frederic's primary focus really lies in policy analysis and policy prototyping. He's currently also involved in Sustain Brussels, a project, an urban initiative, we could say, that supports Brussels businesses in their transition to using innovative technologies and AI. And many of the questions can also be around what are the future texts that will apply to me. We will also have the pleasure today of having Kevin Baum. Kevin Baum holds the position of Deputy Head and Manager at the Neuromechanistic Modeling Research Division of the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, the FKI. He has completed a Master's in Computer Science and Philosophy at Sartor. His research really predominantly centers on the interdisciplinary challenges posed by explainability and perspicuity, particularly in understanding how these properties can mitigate societal risk associated with AI systems. We will then have the pleasure of having our good friend Alex Moltzo, also from CLAIRE. He has led also at Neura AI in Norway, the coordination work policy on ethics in the largest national research collaboration in Norway for the last few years. During the last years, he has also seen the development of a general approach to AI policy towards more specialized framework in different domains, particularly healthcare, and he has also worked a lot recently on AI in the public sector. We will also have the pleasure of having Giovanni Sarto. He's a full professor in philosophy and law and legal informatics at the University of Bologna. He's a member of the executive committee of the International Association for Artificial Intelligence and Law since 1995. And he will give us all his insight as well on the AI Act. So the floor is now yours, Frederic Heymans, to present to us what is this AI Act, what is in it, and give you this brief overview that we all need to kickstart a good conversation. I want to also maybe state, while Frederic is getting prepared, a few words on how does it work, this AQuA session. For all the people on YouTube, please write in the chat your questions. We will relay them to the panelists of today. So please, all your burning questions, key questions about AI or the AI Act are all good to us. So please don't hesitate to let them know to us. So Frederic, the floor is yours, and we invite you to maybe start your presentation. In the meantime, I can maybe also share the fact that if you are interested in all the other AQuA sessions, I invite you to go on CLAIRE website. And on the CLAIRE website, you will be able to have an overview of the different topics that we tried to cover over the last years. And you will have a better sense of also what European research on AI can look like. Frederic, the floor is yours.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll briefly try to give an overview of a very complicated piece of legislation. First, let's have a general aspect. The AI Act was introduced in 2021 by the European Commission. Currently, it's going through a process of trialogues, and the process is supposed to end by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. So the AI Act uses a risk-based approach, using a layered approach with unacceptable risks, high risk uses of AI systems with specific transparency obligations and minimal to no risks. So it uses a horizontal approach, meaning it lays out rules for AI across all sectors and applications, ensuring consistency and coherence in AI regulations across the EU. And for example, it uses a different approach than the UK. The UK introduced a proposal this summer, the AI white paper, where they use a vertical strategy. And the idea there is that it relies on existing regulators considering the impacts of AI on their jurisdictions. So the rationale behind this approach is that it limits new regulatory burdens, which may hinder innovation while also providing sufficient flexibility to deal with the new technological advances. Let me briefly stop at the definition that is used in the AI Act. The definition here, I'll first compare the definition in the AI Act and the definition that is also used by the Council of Europe. It's important to compare both definitions because they have different implications for the regulation and governance of AI systems in Europe and beyond. The EU and the Council of Europe are two distinct but interrelated organizations that share common values and objectives. However, they also have different memberships, competences, and legal instruments. So first, the definition of the European Commission. The EU definition is somewhat vague and broad, as it covers software that can generate outputs such as contents, predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing the environments they interact with. The Council of Europe definition is based on the draft convention of AI. This definition is more narrow and specific, as it covers systems developed through machine learning approaches and logic and knowledge-based approaches. The Council of Europe definition aims to ensure human dignity and protect fundamental rights and values. But back to the AI Act and the layered approach. We'll first stop at the prohibited AI systems. 4 types of AI systems are prohibited in the version of 2021. First one is subliminal manipulation resulting in physical and psychological harm. For example, the use of dark patterns in digital advertising. Second type is the exploitation of children or mentally disabled persons, resulting in physical or psychological harm. Third type is general purpose social scoring. In the original version, this was only related to public authority use of social scoring, but discussions are going on now to widen the scope and also look at private use of social scoring. And then the last type that is prohibited is the remote real-time use of biometric identification for law enforcement purposes in public accessible spaces. Then the second and broadest layer is actually the high-risk AI systems. There are 2 types of high-risk AI systems according to the current text. AI systems that are part of a product, and AI systems with an application in a certain sector or with a certain purpose. In this first category, where AI systems are part of a product, AI system is a product or a safety component of a product covered by Part A of the list of legislation in the Annex 2. And the system requires third-party conformity assessment. Included in this list are 12 types, including machinery, elevators and cableway installations and toys, among other things. And excluded are things like civil aviation, agricultural and forestry vehicles, and marine equipment. In the second category of high risks, these are AI systems with the application in certain sector and certain purposes. Here we have a longer list: biometric identification and categorization of natural persons, management and operation of critical infrastructure, AI systems used in education and vocational training, more specifically, the assessment of students and participants and determination of access or allocation to educational institutions. AI systems used for in employment, workers management, and access to self-employment. Here, more specifically, for recruitment or selection, decision on promotion and termination of employment relationships. Fifth type is access to and enjoyment of access to and employment of essential private services and public services and benefits, such as the use or by or behalf of government agencies to assess citizens' eligibility for government benefits and services. Assessments of creditworthiness of persons used for deployment or prioritization of emergency services. The sixth type is the use of AI systems by law enforcement. Number 7 is migration, asylum, and border control and management. Also, for this type of high risk category, there's a lot of discussions at the moment. And the last type is administration of justice and democratic processes. AI systems intended to assist a judicial authority in researching and interpreting facts and the law, and in applying the law to a concrete set of facts. For these high-risk AI systems, there are a large set of requirements. Among these are setting up a risk management system with testing procedures, certain measures, and periodic risk analysis. Providers also need to apply to data and data governance rules, appropriate data management practices. There are rules for technical documentation, rules for logging and record keeping. There are rules for transparency and provision of information to users. The purpose of this is to enable users to understand the output of the system, to understand and to appropriately use the AI system. There are rules for human oversight and rules for accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. A smaller, more specific layer is the layer for AI with specific transparency obligations. And this is about Article 52 in the text. Here, there are obligations for certain type of AI systems to notify persons that they are interacting with an AI system unless this is evident, notify persons that emotional recognition or biometric categorization systems are applied to them, or apply the label to deepfakes. Then some words in the governance structure. In the original text, a lot of responsibility was being pushed to the national level. National level, every member state is supposed to set up a national competent authority with a certain set of tasks. National competent authority would also be a notifying authority. They would have rules as a market surveillance authority. There would be a national accreditation body, and they would also be a national contact point, both for people living in the member states, but also contact point to the EU level. On the EU level, there will be European AI boards will be set up. Possibly other structures will also be set up, like an European AI office. But the European AI boards will be composed with members of the national supervisory authorities to have tasks such as collect and share expertise, uniformization of administrative practices, and issue opinions and recommendations. A small part of the AI Act is about supporting measures for supporting innovation. One part is about promoting regulatory sandboxes in member states, and second part is providing support for SMEs and startups. Current situation, so the trialogues are going on at the moment. These are political negotiations between the EU Council of Ministers, the European Parliament, and the Commission. The last trialogue took place last evening, but more are still to come. I think one is planned next week. Final agreement should come out of these trialogues. This could, depending on how the discussions go, that could be by the end of this year, or maybe by the beginning of next year. Current additions are being discussed with specific rules for foundational models and general purpose AI. There might be changes to the governance structure. For example, like I just said, might be an introduction of an AI office at the EU level. And there are also discussions going on for further requirements on, for example, fundamental rights, impact assessments, sustainability obligations, rules for workplace disposition, but also rules for to protect the creative sector in Europe. With this, I now give the floor to Giovanni, who will give more insights on the current debates.
Thank you very much, Frederic. This was really helpful to have this large overview. So Giovanni, the floor is yours to maybe also introduce some complementary information and updates.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. I will complement what Frederic just said by focusing on the the contribution of the European Parliament, who has presented, I think, 771, amendments to the document that was proposed by the Commission. So I cannot go through all those amendments, but I will just mention the most important ones. And then we will see what happens, how the two bodies, the Parliament and the Council, will converge. So I share my screen. Share, okay. I hope you can see my slides. Okay, so let me go to the beginning. So what are the main changes?
Sorry, Giovanni, you have to click on swap displays.
Okay, you're right. Swap. What is the swap?
Up on the upper left. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
First of all, the European Parliament introduces an article 4A, where there is an indication of the more general principle that the best effort obligation to make to develop a new AI system with comply with implement, as much as possible, those kind of the principles that you can see listed on the screen. And these principles are repeated at various locations of the AI Act. I think that one of the things that are not so good about this act is that is a very long text with a lot of repetitions. At least the Parliament introduced a kind of summary at the beginning. Another important change proposed by the European Parliament is a completely different definition of AI system in comparison to the one proposed by the Commission. So the Commission, as you remember from the previous presentation, from Frederick's presentation, focuses on the kind of technologies that are used, and they focus on machine learning, on knowledge-based system, on symbolic approaches, and I think also statistics in the definition of the Commission that was dropped then apparently by the Council. Here we have instead the notion of autonomy. So the distinguishing feature of AI is the fact that this system operates with some levels of autonomy. And this raises, I think, a bit of issue. When is the level of autonomy existing or at least sufficient to classify a system as an AI one? No answer can be found in the text as it is. Another interesting aspect of the European Parliament approach is that they provide a definition of what is a foundation model. This is after the storm caused by GTP and other similar generative AI systems. The Parliament tries to regulate this kind of system, and this is the definition of a foundation model, trained on a broad data at scale, designed for a generality of output, and can be adapted to a wide range of distinctive tasks. Also, how this definition can be made workable, I think, is a kind of a challenge. We have already seen the high-risk approach. Sorry, I have to take this out just a second. Okay. And I will not go into details, but both the kind of system that are prohibited, generating an acceptable risk, and also the high-risk ones is expanded to a considerable extent by the European Parliament. For instance, a recommender system, the system used for suggesting news of advertising, are considered high risk according to the proposal by the Parliament. So you see a substantial extension in a very important set of systems. And with regard to foundation models, a specific article is provided, the definitions we already seen, but then beside the definition, there is also a description of the obligation for the provider of foundation model that somehow duplicate the obligation that are provided in general for high-risk system. In addition, I think there is the requirement, which is quite interesting, to provide intelligible instruction for downstream providers, that is those who use the foundation model to provide applications. Then another important change, suggestion for change, is the introduction, besides, in addition to the risk assessment, or as a component of it, if you want, of a fundamental rights assessment, which requires deployers to to identify whether a system may have impacts on fundamental rights, and to provide various a plan for mitigation if this is the case, and also some further requirements concerning what information has to be provided in the case of such systems. Again, there is a kind of application between risk assessment and fundamental right assessment, but still this is an interesting novelty of the Act. Last point that I would like to indicate, there are many others. They said there are 771 changes. So the text is, Parliament would like to change the text in a very substantial way. There is a right to explanation of individual decision-making. This is an issue that emerged in connection with the GDPR, but here it is interesting that the Parliament says that this explanation should include parameters and input data. So when a person is negatively affected by adversely affected by an automatic decision, the person should know why, what features, if I understand it, parameter, what features determined the negative assessment, and what input data enabled this feature being inferred. Okay, I think I stop here. I hope
Thank you.
It was useful.
Yes, thank you very much to both of you. And if you could stop sharing your screen, this was very useful to have this general overview. So I will maybe start and by asking all the speakers to turn on their cameras. We now enter the core of the AQuA session. And I have a question maybe for you first, Alex. So as it was pointed out by both Frederic and Giovanni, it is quite complicated, of course. This text has multi-layers, multiple possible interpretations. From a national organization point of view, also focusing on how to feed research strategies, what do you think will be the main challenge with this AI Act? And could you maybe give us some indications of what will happen at the national level?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, a contentious point now, as I understand it, especially in the last trialogue, is the open source aspect. So, of course, for researchers, kind of this is an important point, and I think also important for society to consider, kind of how will this be handled in this context. Of course, research. I think there are some exceptions now, at least in the current versions, to research, but. On a societal level, I think there is a lot of jostling in member states, as far as I have heard, in terms of rumors of who are going to be the authority that will manage this, because this will also go from a piece of legislation into an operational, practical approach for member states, but also Norway, where I am located at the moment. I mean, we made a sandbox for AI, a national sandbox in 2020. So 3 years ago, it's been operational for 3 years. They have made a lot of reports. So for me, I think, I mean, what a great development, right? I mean, like in one way, it's good to be positive to some extent, that we are thinking about citizens' rights and we're thinking about who will be responsible for this in our nation, right? I mean, if we are supposed to think about how this affects our population, how do we communicate across Europe, So I think also it is important to stress that the Act in its current form also mandates that, 2 to 25 people will be responsible for this. So they are also kind of actively asking different member states to set up a way to manage this across different nations. So it's also kind of, it is a piece of AI legislation, but it's also about AI governance. How are we going to govern this across Europe?
Thank you very much. And I have a question for you, Kevin, representing also a very large research organization in Germany. How do you think organizations like yours can and could best implement the AI Act? Because we know that, of course, all these rules will have to be followed up, implemented, and this covers also such broad aspects. How do you think, from a compliance point of view, your organization can get prepared, but also researchers can get prepared to having all this new information when they develop AI systems?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think first of all, the whole thing still demands much more research, right? So, for example, we are currently working on just understanding Article 14, human oversight, and technical measures that enable effective human oversight or meaningful human oversight, depending on which version you look into. So what can we do? We can try to set up experiments in real work environments with real AI systems, with real people, and try to understand under what circumstances their conditions, I think A to F or so, are actually fulfilled, and on what part technical measures can help there, and on what aspects we need completely different approaches, like education on the side and preparation on the side of the human overseer, and how to determine at the end of the day whether you have even implemented a meaningful human oversight thingy. So for there, we can develop new technical measures, starting with XAI methods, but also good user interfaces or runtime monitors. So there's a lot of computer science research that we can do, but I think we need more experience with our eye on the concrete formulations in order to determine what actually, will be at the end count as a compliance. So I see us as specifically working there, and working from passage to passage, from article to article, from a technical, but not only a technical, but a socio-technical system point of view.
Thank you very much. And I have a question for you, Giovanni and Frederic. So we often talk about, of course, all the advances that this AI Act might bring to regulate and better govern AI from a European perspective, but not only. We oftentimes also, maybe as a research community, like to point out what is missing. And sometimes what is missing can also tell a lot about the different tensions or discussions that led through the text. So maybe starting with you, Giovanni, do you think that the AI Act has something missing? Do you think that it could be maybe better improved over the years with new features or new rules? What in your view is lacking? You are muted.
I unmute myself. But frankly, I think that the AI Act is very broad. It aims at covering the whole domain. We may wonder whether there is too much rather than too little. So, for instance, there are a lot of repetitions and detailed provisions of technical measures, for instance, for the purpose of human oversight, that maybe some technician would find not really useful. The European Parliament, in particular, introduced a very detailed set of requirements, for instance, for assessing risk to fundamental rights. To what extent this detail is really necessary? Some points are not only, as it was mentioned before, the issue of environmental impact sustainability is, on the contrary, is touched very little. There is just an invitation to, in particular with regard to foundation model, to take care of the I don't remember exactly the word that is used, but basically of the environmental impact of these models. Then another issue, but it's very difficult to say what's missing. For instance, we have this classification of the various type of high-risk systems, and obviously this. You need to have a classification, but such classification are imperfect because some systems that fall within the high risk categories seem really to be very little risk. On the contrary, some systems that are excluded seems to be high risk. So I think that we have to wait for further rules by the Commission, by the harmonization bodies, in order to have a picture of what is happening and what is missing, I think.
Thank you very much. And Frederic, I have the same question for you.
Yeah, maybe 2 points that could be added, or protection of the creative industry that is being discussed at the moment. But I think it should be included in the final text, certainly in the context of foundational models. And then the second thing is certainly if we look at what's going on in the world related to climate change, there should be requirements related to sustainability. At the moment, there is being discussed if this should be added to the high-risk requirements, or if it should be added to the technical standards that would be voluntary. But I think it would be a good thing if it would be a requirement to have, for example, eco-design included in it, to have like measurement of energy use of AI systems included into the requirements.
Thank you very much. So we have a question from YouTube for all the panelists. So I will read it. There are a lot of aspects to consider according to the AI Act, such as understanding the impact of AI on people. I am wondering what are the panelists' views on this practicality of this? As I see it, we still need to develop a lot of the tools and methods to take these big things into account in practice. So, Alex, I see you nodding, so maybe then I will leave you the floor.
Yeah, I was discussing with someone in Norway about this human-centered AI, like how do we put citizens at the center? So, I mean, do we have this process of like deliberative democracy? Who is this risk for here? And like, how do we include the population? There's already a growing concern, like in the US, we see it in the UK, we see it in Norway about technology. So So, I mean, we have to create trust in society. I mean, Norway is known as a place where a lot of people trust the state. You know, they pay their taxes. They are like quite happy about the services that we provide. And we should not erode that trust here. I mean, so we just really have to work so hard to try to think about how we can maintain this trust. And I mean, AI Act being, you know, some sort of product-oriented legislation with the standards and like with making sure like that people can trust the products that are put on the European market. I think that it's a healthy move. You know, it's something we should applaud, and of us in the Act, you know, how do we have to think about how this impacts citizens' lives, you know, everyday lives, risks to people. So I mean, like that's something that I feel like is really it's an important discussion that has to be followed up on, like beyond the legislation and beyond the AI.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Who else? Frederic, Giovanni, I see that you...
If I can follow on that, I think that there is a tension, but this is inevitable in the AI Act between the need to have some kind of public participation and also the need to protect industrial secrecy, intellectual property. And seems to me that the AI Act is a bit on the latter side, but maybe this is inevitable. I don't know to what extent this could be changed, in the sense that the documentation is going to be prepared by the company, and then is going to be assessed by private certification bodies. So I don't see much of this information going into the public debate. How to ensure that this happens, at least to a certain extent, I think is an interesting challenge for the future.
Thank you. So for Frederic and Kevin, I will then use you for a next question from YouTube. The question is, who is deciding that the software package has AI inside it or not? Because if not, it will not be subject to the AI Act. What do you make of it, Kevin? And I will copy paste the question for you as well.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe. So this highly depends at the end of the day, as we have seen, right? They are in the different versions with different definitions of AI. So first of all, it depends on what definition we end up at the end. Then it should be clear that there was a lot of discussion whether this or that definition is too broad or maybe even too narrow. And I think so. This is not the most important definition, right? The most important definition is what is a high-risk AI system. So in a sense, the first thing is the entrance ticket to being addressed by this regulation. And then the second thing is whether it is high risk. And I think that the second question is much more important, the categorization. For me, we could maybe circumvent the question that is raised here by saying all kind of machinery, because at the end of the day, I personally believe what we should regulate here. So at the end, the whole thing is a product safety regulation, right? And why should this be restricted to, say, machine learning based statistical stuff and not statistical based? So as we've seen, this has been dropped in the version of the parliament, I think, or in one of the versions. So this is the first question we should ask ourselves. Then who will decide? Yeah, well, we will see what counts then to fall under this definition. But there are other things or other aspects that make this more even harder, right? So what, for example, is a component of a system, an AI component? As far as I know, the notion of component is also not clearly defined within the regulation. And so what makes it a critical safety or safety critical part of the system? So if I make it possible to detach that from the system, if I just update that thingy and at day one it has no AI in it and the next it has, so I cannot answer the question right now because we don't have the definition, and the regulatory bodies that will be implemented have then to decide whether it falls under that or not. But I can raise doubts that the question will be easy to answer because there are even more moving parts.
Thank you very much. And for you, Frederic, also because you're in touch with a lot of maybe smaller organizations faced with all these different definitions, Yeah, what do you answer to them a bit related to also the question?
I agree with Kevin on the aspect of the high-risk AI systems. At the Knowledge Center where I work, we also are organizing a policy prototyping exercise. This year, it's about the transparency obligation of high-risk AI systems. But we also have general discussions about the definition of these systems, and we see that it is currently causing problems and causing a lot of uncertainty. So I think this is really something that needs to be tackled in the final version of the text. It needs to be cleared out. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I have a question from the attendees on Zoom. How vulnerable do you think the European market is to threats from big tech companies who are indicating that they might pull products from the EU due to this act? Maybe I will ask you, Giovanni, to answer first these questions. What do you think? So do you think, and I put the question in the chat for you, Giovanni, so you can also maybe read it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. I just was opening the chat. One of the things is to threats from big companies who are indicating that. Yeah, I think that that the risk is not so much the companies pull products, but maybe that they move the development out of the EU in order not to incur in this kind of regulation. The worry may be excessive, nevertheless, because basically there is this obligation to engage in documentation, certification. So probably this worry is excessive, as it was the worry with regard to the, a good example is the GDPR, the data protection regulation. It seems to be a tragedy, but then in the end, I think the companies found a way to accommodate. But still, I think there is some work to be done concerning how to make companies accommodate. And I was just thinking, this very broad, after what Kevin said, this very broad definition of AI, we may worry whether, for instance, even word processors are autonomous to a certain extent. So should every company which deploys a word processor or even a spreadsheet subject the application to the condition of the AI Act. So to make the Act workable, some effort must be done in circumscribing its application, I think.
Thank you very much. So also to all the YouTube or Zoom attendees, please, again, don't hesitate to send us other questions. Thank you. You've been already very productive. So your answer also, Giovanni, maybe leads to another question. It's also the question of ChatGPT, and I will try to not have too many questions about it. But of course, the AI Act was prepared, worked on before ChatGPT, and all the new sets of questions that came that also transformed a bit the way we work, at least at our level here in Brussels. We got an increasing amount of questions. And do you think the AI Act was solid enough to maybe also include these new developments and technological developments or new products that then led to an increased attention around AI? What do you think, Alex?
I mean, we're still kind of struggling to deal with machine learning. Kind of that has been used, I guess. Like there are other pieces of legislation being rolled out, like the Digital Services Act. You know, content moderators. Like there's been a lot of documentaries about this, but you know, with the kind of genocide that happened in Myanmar, and they're kind of being in the early stages, they're kind of one Burmese-speaking content moderator. Obviously, that was like a terrible idea. I mean, so how do we protect democracy in the face of machine learning? And I think, you know, the EU is really trying, you know, and like we're also in Norway. There has been like this case of Meta. They won a case in Norway against Meta in terms of kind of advertising linked to you know, behavioral data. Will they win that in other courts? I mean, that remains to be seen. And also speaking to the previous questions, about more penguins than Europeans can use Google Bard, that was an article about that previously. So obviously we want solutions to be rolled out, but I don't think that large technology companies should sort of like has been done, I think, in the last half year, say that, we're not rolling out our solutions there because of how you are acting with legislation. It almost feels like some excuse, because of course they could have rolled it out in a responsible way and set a good standard for use. So I think it's a bit of more an excuse. We have to adapt. We have to make sure that these solutions work in a much better way. We have to make sure that we don't erode democratic participation, right? I mean, I think that's a central core to the whole discussion. We see that we have backsliding towards autocracy around the world. It's a trend. We see a lot of conflicts around the world, and I think artificial intelligence, machine learning plays a role in overall public discourse. So that's kind of what we have to remind ourselves, that this is what is this about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answer, and maybe also leading to you, Giovanni. We often hear also researchers or tech representatives saying that you should not regulate the technology or make a regulation about the technology itself, but just more as a general practices. Where do you stand on it? Because some people, of course, have even in a research community, quite strong views on what the AI Act might do or not do, because it focuses too much on one specific definition of AI or not. And maybe I was curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Oh, thank you very much for this question. I think that it's a very difficult one. I think that, for instance, compared for the GDPR, which focuses on a clear issue, the processing of personal data on kind of applications, the AI Act, to some extent, focuses on technology, even though it is not so possible to distinguish AI from other kind of software. So I think that the direction is to focus more on applications and uses rather than on the techniques being used. Even though I think that some techniques, such as the machine learning approaches, pose specific problems that are not related, for instance, so much to the symbolic approaches. So, but these may be dealt by distinguishing the different kind of risks that the technology presents rather than on a specific technology that's being deployed, I think. So my view, there is a bit too much detail, I think, on the AI Act on specific technologies and technological, also for specific technology-based mitigation measures. As technology is developing quickly, possibly, I would have been in favor of a shorter act, more based on principle rather than on so many detailed prescriptions. But let's see what comes out. Right. The text is growing continuously, especially after the intervention of the parliament.
But thank you, Giovanni. And maybe, Kevin, I have for you a follow-up questions to one of the former questions. So then is the AI Act then regulating the risk on hardware, also machinery? Any software regulation exists for general software already? So the question is, yes, indeed, what is the AI Act specifically regulating? And from your understanding, what do you make of this question?
Oh, to be honest, I did not really get the question, but maybe I'm not the most competent person to answer that question. So I'm maybe not a law guy here.
Okay, maybe I can then leave it to you, Frederic. I also copy-pasted the question for you. It is a tricky one, but I think it has also a fair point about what is the AI Act regulating? Is it the risk specifically? Frederic, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm also struggling a bit with this question.
I think what I can understand from it is also, and I let the person maybe react on YouTube, is also, for instance, at a recent robotics conference, people were struggling a bit with what is exactly regulated by the AI Act. Are we talking about one specific definition of software? Are robots included, yes or no? And some people could say also, specifically from the robotics side, should we just call it, and it's a bit something Giovanni touched upon, but just digital technology. And I think the understanding and perception of what this is talking about might also vary and require a lot of nuance in the interpretation. But Alex, you maybe have a thought on this.
Yeah, I think just briefly that the proposal also says that they are working on updating kind of other directives, and part of that is the machinery directive, and also other parts of it is updating kind of liability and thinking about tort law, and so it is. I mean, it leads to a wider discussion, So I think that's fairly important to remember. But I think the question about does it regulate hardware or software, I mean, it's perhaps also important to say that to some extent we have to think about outcomes, right? So whether it is software or hardware, it's also about kind of the outcomes, the harms. I mean, that's a lot when it comes to risk, risk-based approaches, and it's as Kevin said, kind of preceding this kind of the socio-technical aspects of risk-based approach.
All right, thank you. So maybe Kevin, a specific question for you is, what is the general feel that you get from your colleagues and from other research organizations, Germany, about the upcoming AI Act? Do you think researchers are maybe looking anxiously at this new regulation? Do they feel that on top of the GDPR, it's an added aspect to consider? Could you share maybe from your German perspective as well, a sense of where people stand?
Yeah, so this differs a lot. So there's a high variety there. So for example, I'm right now at a conference, ISOLA. So we have an interdisciplinary track here, and we had a sub-track on AI today. So computer scientists, philosophers, people from the law, psychologists. And if I could say that we can agree on anything, then it is that regarding their potential impacts, for instance, people can agree to disagree. Between there will be close to no real impact, and it is only a lot of work for it is over-regulation, and the lawyers will be happy, and the people who will develop the auditings will be happy too. This will be a actual nightmare, and a lot of products won't be possible anymore. It will be a nightmare for startups. It will be a wonderland for startups, because all these methods that are now asked for must be developed by someone. So these are opportunities. I would say most of the tech people are still thinking about that a lot of these definitions go wrong. And so for example, what is AI? So I again say this is not the most important definition, but also where I would say a lot of people agree right now is that, for example, these Frederic, I think it was Giovanni, right? In the newest version, we have these general principles, and that people should put in their best efforts to match them. And there are things like robustness and transparency. And I know of no one in the AI community who would say that he's completely understands what this means to have the best efforts to make a system robust or transparent. This can mean so many things, and so many of these things cannot be actually, for example, verified and proven, and this is nature of these AI systems. And people are scratching heads there, right? And especially when there's this passage that, yeah, all these kind of stuff should be more specified 1 year after the AI Act is already implemented. People are a little bit worried that this is really putting uncertainty out there. So I would say this is right now, people know that they cannot predict the impact. It is still too early, but with some of the definitions that are so unclear, and now these special or general principles, right? They affect all the AI stuff. So people are a little worried that they don't know exactly what this will mean for them.
Thank you. And Frederic, I see your mic unmuted. Do you have anything to add to it as well?
Maybe two things. When I talk to policymakers about the impact of the AI Act, I hear a lot of nervousness, especially here in Belgium, where we have like companies shattered over regions and federal level. Especially people in the regions, they don't know where to start or how to prepare, because they are also confronted with other European regulations, such as the Data Act, but also the Digital Services Act, where they have to comply with certain things. So they're a bit getting nervous to be overburdened with all these rules. And then when I talk to people in the field, professionals or legal practitioners, they see like a similar story as compared to the GDPR, where they again see like overburdening with rules, and again they don't know where to start with preparing for the AI Act.
All right, thank you very much. So it is 56. So we have some last concluding words, and maybe I was curious to hear you all saying in maybe a few sentences what you hope for the future of the AI Act. It's a very general question. I am aware of it, but maybe let's start with you, Alex. What are your hopes? Because we heard a lot of anticipation, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but what are your hopes for the AI Act?
I mean, I hope it, as it has done, like created a lot of really valuable discussions about how we want to govern and how we want to think about AI in that relation. I mean, and I also would like to stress that this doesn't solve AI governance. You know, there are so many discussions that we have to take on a national level, and so many kind of value propositions as to how we're going to govern artificial intelligence that will need to be had. I also just want to make a quick comment about openness versus transparency, because like in Norwegian, they translated transparency with åpenhet. So in a way, like openness is about including, openness is about opening the door. You know, you can look into the window of a skyscraper, but you know, what will you get out from it? We have to figure out how we can create more open data, more open ways to understand how these decisions are made.
Thank you. Giovanni?
No, thank you. I think that what I hope first, that this text is a bit improved and clarified, because it's really hard to handle the way it is written now, especially after the modification by the Parliament. Then I hope that the authorities that are going to implement this document will be reasonable, because the document is based on this idea of accountability. That is, it is up to the private parties, to the companies, basically, to devise appropriate way to achieve the goals of the legislation. And so which makes it difficult for them to understand in advance what they have to do to achieve this purpose, as it just emerged. But I think that an appropriate guidance and carefulness by the implementation authorities could enable companies to find ways of complying that are also sustainable from their business point of view.
Thank you. Kevin and Frederic, you have 30 seconds each.
Okay, I try to make it fast. So I agree with what was said. And for me, as a computer scientist and philosopher and ethicist especially, I just hope that this sparks not only debates, but also research into the right directions regarding mitigating harm, improving fairness on a substantial level, regarding responsibility and perspicuity in a general concept. And I think this will be done. So you can have a lot of criticism here, but I also think this is a jump into the right direction.
Thank you. Frederic, the last words.
Okay, quickly. My hope is that we will get a balanced and targeted AI Act that can harness the potential of foundational models while promoting competition and producing market dominance, let's say.
All right. Some perfect final words. So I want to thank you all, Giovanni, Frederic, Alex, Kevin, for participating and giving us some of your time for today between conferences and so forth. I want to thank again the special interest group on AI ethics from CLAIRE. I want to thank the CLAIRE central staff team. I invite you to look at the other AQuA sessions coming up. Look at the CLAIRE website. And to finish, I want to say and wish you all a very good day. We say goodbye. And I think we can stop now.